Thank you, Dr. Chizia, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chimeze, for having me.
What does this NBS report tell us about the rate of poverty, the level of poverty and inequality in Nigeria?
Well, I think that the report tells us what we know, you and I know. It's obvious. If you take what has happened, with this pandemic and the attempt, to try and lock down. It's obvious that the challenges we have. You have an informal market, it's about 60% of your economy. And so most of your citizens, they live on, if they don't go to work in a day, they won't have any money to spend. And so when you're not came with lockdown, so there was crisis in the land. And so you had a situation where when it started, those of us who thought we were secluded, our lives were threatened. It was so much so that, as you must have heard, gangs were moving about and moving into the states and forcefully disposing people of whatever they had. Say, look, we're hungry, we want to eat. And so I think that it's obvious that poverty in the land, it's large. We never needed Bureau of Statistics, for instance, to be telling us. But it's good, at least they go through the scientific process. And they look at the figures and they come back to us and say, this is what it is. So at least we have an indication, instead of just having guesstimates, so we have an indication of what it is like, on paper. But I think that it's a worrisome situation, and it's obvious to everybody that what has caused this is a failure of leadership. So we have leadership failure. They've not known what we should do. We've not grown the way we should grow. You have a place where corruption is so endemic, so even the monies that flow into the system, most of it is diverted, and so you find what's happening. So it's good that this pandemic is happening, and I hope that we should be able to make the best use of it. And one of the things that has come to light is the fact that our health services is not what it should be, and so we're all in it together. Nobody can jump off and go overseas. And so with respect that I'm a bit concerned in the sense that I say to myself, all these monies we are gathering and putting temporary structures in place, I think we should begin to think about the long term, fairly long term. And so we say to ourselves, so we are mobilizing so much billions of naira by private sector. I think the last time was almost 25 billion, and I think it's going on. And the governor says, in fact, they expect it to get to 40 billion. And so if we get those monies, we should be careful. So if we're going to we should have an eye to say, look, beyond this, what is happening now? We should be able to say, look, let's do something there that will be permanent. And so we want to see that.
All right, let's look at the nitty-gritty of this report. It shows that the highest poverty levels were in the north, particularly Sokoto. We have Sokoto, Taraba. In Sokoto, we had 87.7% of people living under the poverty line, compared with 4.5% in Lagos State, which had the lowest rate. Why there's so much disparity, despite the anchor borrowers of the CBN arguably going more towards the north?
Well, in Chimeze, they've not even factored in the northeast. That has been...
well, they didn't include Borno State. Yes, they didn't include Borno State because of what happened there.
Yeah, so but I think that the thing is that you have a large population is large. You have the Almajiri system. These things are coming out. Have been thrown at our face. You see, for instance, now that Kano has overtaken Lagos as the epicenter of coronavirus. So but, the infection is coming from there, and people are being sent away. So people have been sent away. And what's happened before is that it's a cultural thing. So people, the educational system, the formation system was such that poverty was being, perpetrated. So I think that's exactly what has happened. And we expect that as we going forward, these are some of the things we begin to address. The Almajiri system, and not that says you shouldn't, people shouldn't have formation, but I think that formation could be done in such a way that, people should also imbibe certain values, learn certain skills, and so on and so forth. Not just Quranic, So you learn Quranic and class. So you go to school. I think that you can have a formal setting where, people will learn Quran, learn Arabic, understand that drives their religion for them, and then also be able to be a better version of themselves. So you'll be able to read and write, and then you'll be able to, be able to take decisions for yourself that is informed, So I think that I see this as a crisis, and I think that we should pray that we optimize the challenges.
Now, inflation rates is the biggest erosion of people's purchasing power. Inflation is currently at almost 13%. We have the rate at the Treasury bills, just 3%. Now, compare that with the rate of inflation. Now, we have exchange rate, well, at the parallel market currently at 430 naira to the dollar. Does that mean that government programs are not actually, taking care of the multidimensional poverty rate that we have?
Well, I think that that's something that to some extent, I think that we're overwhelmed as it were. I think that's one of the things that you needed to do, in an economy is to target inflation rate. And if you don't target inflation rate, I mean, I read Bola Tinubu's comment, asking the central bank, to as it were, to just reduce the interest rates, And then I put a post and which says, to the effect that it's not something that you just do. It's not a tap. You don't just turn it off. And if, for instance, as you just rightly said, if inflation rate is about 13%, and I put my money in a savings account, I'm a creditor, my money in savings account, and you pay me interest of about 5%, that money is losing value. What it is, in effect. So I pay me interest rate of 5%, and inflation is 13%. By the time you pay that interest, my money has lost value. And so what that does to the economy is that for those who are knowledgeable enough, they don't want to save their money. And if you don't save your money, and then, so one of the challenges we have is that we have to try and deepen the financial sector. We have to try as much as possible to bring those who are on the margin, those who are not participating, to put them into the financial sector. And so that's a challenge. So you must do that, target the rate of inflation, bring it down. But in circumstances...
No, but the central bank has been talking about targeting inflation. Of course, we know that's what they're supposed to do, targeting inflation, but we've always had inflation on the high side. Now, when we look at the methodology that the NBS used, they are saying that the poverty is measured, indicating that in Nigeria, poverty is measured using consumption expenditures rather than income. So if inflation is high, I mean, you wouldn't have the purchasing power to get what you have to get.
Well, I think that those they were talking about technicalities. So how are you going to spend? How are you going to spend if you have an income? Whatever you want to do at the end of the day, poverty to a large extent should be assessed based on what you're able to attract. Well, of course, they have a way of defining poverty. What quality of life can you have?
In fact, that brings me to the question of how do you really measure poverty? Because just as you said, how do you spend when you don't earn an income? So just wondering, why measuring poverty in your expenditure and not your income?
Well, I think that's the World Bank and so on. They normally say if you have an income of less than $1 a day and so on, then you are poor. I have some issues with that in the sense that first of all, dollar is not a legal tender. And if you take rate of exchange today, a dollar is about 400 and something naira. And if you're a Nigerian and you are earning 400 something naira, you can earn it comfortably in a day, then you're not poor. That's the reality. So most people can't get that. So if you're getting that, then you're not poor. And so how do you define poverty? I think that it's something that we have to sit back, have a dialogue, have a discussion, and begin to work out our own templates, for doing this. Unfortunately, we don't want to think outside the box. So we take what is given to us and we just run with it. But I think that's, like I said to you, if I can comfortably earn 500 naira a day, 400 naira a day, I can't be poor. There are many people can't see that. Many, they can't see that. So how do you define poverty? So it's an issue. But you and I know what for the person that is poor, essentially what happens to the person is that the person cannot afford the basic things. And so the person that is poor cannot afford to eat. So like most people say, if you can remove hunger, from poverty.
You can afford adequate health care, good education.
Yes. But I think that also going forward, what all this says to us is that everything we have to do has to be pro-poor. And we've been on this, we've said it before, that our budgeting should be pro-poor. And so when you say it has to be pro-poor, that you're looking at those sectors of the economy where you put money in and they will impact the poor. And so you find that UNESCO has been telling us that we should do at least 26% of our budget on education. And you find that we're spending about 4% on education, 5% on education. And so that's the challenge. And so people don't go to school. You have the Almajiris in this world. They don't go to school. They don't know. They don't have a better version of themselves. They can't make better choices. Then so you have issues. You go to the health sector, and then they will come and tell us, that our hospitals are mere consulting centers, clinics, and they're not equipped, and so on and so forth. Look at the state's house. There's supposed to be hospital there. And if you look at the budgets that we put through, in terms of what we're supposed to spend, there, of course, what you put on ground and what it is in reality is another matter. But then the chief of staff of the president was sick and was rushed to a hospital in Lagos here. What does that say to us? I think that, so we should have a place like the presidential house seat, and we look at the budget that's gone in there, and then if we're spending all this money there, that should be a place where people should, if somebody is sick and you are admitted there, then you are the elite, or you are the creme de la creme of this society. And then you go to that place, and then the hospital is not well equipped, and maybe you look for drugs, you don't find them, and so on and so forth. So I think that's we need to orientate ourselves, make sure we begin to spend money on those things that will impact the poor. So you're talking about education, you're talking about health, you're talking about water, you're talking about basic infrastructure, so you're talking about power. Power is very, very important. And then because you want to target the poor, then even the tariffs, tariffs should be phased in such a way that if I live in Ajegunle, I should not pay the same tariff as myself that lives at Lekki Phase 1. So you encourage them, so make sure they have water. Those are things that will impact the poor. Those are things that will bring about development in our economy.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Chizia, for your time. Dr. Boniface Chizia is the Chief Executive Officer, BIC Consultancy Services, and of course, an economist.